People who got up and left during or right after doing it. What happened that made you say, nope, I'm out? Story 1. She was a friend of a coworker. The first red flag? Her very first message to me was a fully bare shower picture. But I was a young guy. What did I care? A few days later, we went on a date, and she ended up coming back to my place. She was pretty insistent about banging, even though I wasn't really feeling it. Eventually, I gave in to the pressure. Before we started, she insisted on turning off the TV, saying she likes doing it in the dark, which okay? We got bare and slid under the sheets. She tells me to go without a rubber, because she can't get pregnant as she ovulated the day before. I say, I don't think that's how it works. I'm wearing a rubber, or we're not doing anything. She pleads, insists she can't get pregnant, tries to convince me otherwise. Fortunately, I don't budge. Eventually, she sighs, relents, and agrees to use protection. We get started, and surprisingly, it was actually pretty good. Eventually, I reach the finish line. And here's where things go completely off the rails. As I'm coming out, she suddenly ninja moves the rubber off me. I hear a slurp. Confused, I reach down and feel myself. There was no rubber. Then I feel her hand, shoving it inside. I flipped on all the lights, started throwing my clothes on, and told her to get dressed. I was taking her to CVS, and I was going to watch her take Plan B. Afterward, I dropped her off at her place and blocked her. Got maybe an hour of sleep before work? I spent the next few months in a constant low-grade panic, bracing myself every time my phone rang from an unknown number. To this day, I have no idea what came of it. For all I know, I could have a 10-year-old out there right now. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. The ex was really weird about using lube. When we were doing it from back, I'd sometimes get a bit dry and ask to use some, but he'd always throw a hissy fit. He seemed to take it as a failure on his part, or like I was insulting him. I tried to explain, it's just more comfortable for me when we use it in that position. It keeps it from being painful. But he wouldn't hear any of it. No lube, no exceptions. Then one day we were doing the vanilla position, and he suddenly paused and reached for the lube. I raised an eyebrow and said, I thought you hated lube. He replied, only when you wanted to use it for back action. This is different. I asked, why? He shrugged and said, this time it's uncomfortable for me. That was it for me. I just got up, got dressed, and walked right out of there. Story 3. Oh dang. I had this experience with a girl who was on the bigger side, which wasn't a problem for me, but she wasn't the greatest looking and kind of smelled funny. I thought it was just her clothes. One night, I was drunk, and she was my neighbor. She invited me to smoke a couple of joints, and I said, hell yeah, I'll be up in a minute. We started talking and listening to a music channel on TV that played classic rock, which is the best. I was 19 years old, and she was about 36 or so. I made a comment, and I guess that got her spark going because she made moves on me. Things started escalating, and then we got ready to do it. That's when I caught a whiff of some bad taco, but I was drunk and decided to slip the rubber on anyway. Well, everything about her after that just turned me off. Her moaning, her movements, everything. So I got up, got dressed, and left without saying a word. It's funny because when I got out, she switched to another position with her backside facing me and waited for me to put it back in, but didn't look to see what was going on behind her first. No words were ever exchanged after that. Story 4. I'd had a bit too much to drink for my wife's birthday, so I went to bed before everyone else left. At some point, I woke up as she started backing into me. I was half asleep, but the important parts were wide awake. Foreplay was minimal. She was doing all the work while I slowly came to. We were doing it for maybe a minute when I reached out, grabbed her waist, and pulled her closer. The moment my hands wrapped around her, I realized it wasn't my wife at all. I pushed her away and threw on my pajamas. Flipping on the lamp, I saw it was my wife's friend. She looked surprised and asked what we should do, how surprised she was to find me in my own bed. I just ignored her and told my wife. We all talked it out, and my wife said she believed it was an honest mistake. But 2 years later, the same friend did it again to someone else, and ended up divorced. Story 5. I've told this story maybe 20 times, My current girlfriend insists I tell it every time we have friends over. Fair warning, it's a bit nasty. Here goes. I'd been single for over 3 years and hadn't seen any action in a while. Decided it was time to fix that involuntary celibacy. So, I installed a dating app and immediately connected with someone. Let's call her Marianne, because that's actually her name. We decided to meet up. She and I were the same age, and I found her really attractive, dressed daringly in long boots and a short skirt. After a few drinks and laughs, we took a taxi to her place. In the taxi, Marianne insisted she usually didn't bring guys home on the first date. She seemed overly interested in my opinions and said things like, "Hope you don't think I'm a cheap whore." I didn't think that, but I found the line of questioning a bit weird. When we arrived at her apartment, we sat on the couch and started getting intimate. Naturally, I thought the next step was the bedroom, but she had other plans. After some kissing and cuddling, she decided it was time for a dance show, a solo performance that lasted over 15 minutes. I was awkward after about 30 seconds, and it only got worse. I remember thinking there was way too much headbanging. When the performance ended, she asked if I liked it. I said yes, it was fantastic. She left the room and came back with her jewelry collection, stones with supposed healing effects, blah blah. She asked if I felt any of the effects. Yeah, I actually feel a bit different, I said. This was clearly a big passion of hers, and we ended up talking about it for over an hour. I was seriously contemplating leaving, but having suffered through so much already, I figured I might as well see how this fairy tale ends. Finally, we settled back onto the couch and picked up where we left off. She confessed she preferred to be controlled in bed. I had no experience with that, but figured I'd give it a shot. Maybe the jewels were still messing with me, because I had trouble maintaining a stiffy with a little oral assistance. We eventually moved on to the main act. I tried to be a bit authoritative, being more decisive than my usual vanilla self. But my newfound persona came at the expense of my stiffy again. Once more, she provided blowy. She obliged, and we then resumed our banging. With her on top, I noticed through the dark that she was wearing lipstick. I laid there wondering how on earth she had time to put that on during our time together. Of course, it wasn't lipstick at all, it was blood. After that realization, my dong simply refused to function and has yet to fully recover. I was done. I got dressed, and she asked again if I thought she was a cheap whore. I said no, but in retrospect, I think she might have preferred a yes. And that's how my involuntary celibacy became voluntary. Story 6. My girlfriend and I were young and backpacking just a couple miles out of town. We reached the bottom of a man-made quarry, where the rocks overhead cast just enough shadow to escape the blazing Texas summer sun. There was a perfectly shaped boulder just big enough for one person to sit on top of. She sat on top of the boulder and slowly started to strip tease. We were both really into it. She kept her eyes closed for the longest time as I touched her. Then, she began opening her eyes, looking right at me. Suddenly, her eyes darted to the side, and she shrieked at the top of her lungs. She immediately covered herself, pointed upward, and hurried to get dressed. Looking down on us from about 2 stories above were 3 hillbilly-looking dudes, one fat shirtless guy in jeans with a crap-eating grin, a lanky older dude leaning against a rock, one hand under his chin like he was sizing us up, and a third probably recording on what looked like a flip phone. The mood instantly died, felt like a scene straight out of a horror movie written and directed by Rob Zombie. Story 7. She started crying loudly after a few minutes of us doing it. I quickly stopped and asked what was wrong. She told me she just ended a 3.5-year relationship and was blindsided by it. I actually really felt bad for her. I guess her ex was sleeping with a woman she was pretty tight with and flaunted it to her while ending things. I spent the night, didn't feel like making an hour-long drive at 3 in the morning. She was pretty embarrassed the next morning, so I took her out for coffee. We talked for about an hour. After that, we didn't speak much for the next 3 months, until she texted me out of the blue. We met up for dinner and ended up finishing what we'd started. We dated casually for a couple of months or so and ended it gracefully. She's a really nice woman, and this absolutely wrecked her self-confidence. Story 8. I went on a date with a guy who was seriously hot and really took care of himself. My panties could have dropped just at the sight of him, lol. We had a really great date and hit it off instantly. He invited me back to his place for a drink. Things started to get heated on the way over, and by the time we arrived, he practically carried me through the door. I was so busy kissing him that I barely noticed my surroundings. It was pretty hot. Then he turned me around for the back action and I glanced around, and oh my god, I was not prepared for what I saw. It was honestly the dirtiest, messiest place I'd ever seen, like straight up vomit-inducing. The more I looked, the worse it got. There I was, in the middle of it, just in total disbelief. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. As soon as I got home, I jumped straight in the shower and scrubbed myself raw. Story 9. One day, I was contacted by a couple I kinda knew from high school. We started chatting, and the guy mentioned that the reason they reached out was because they were both interested in a casual three-way. So, we got together, talked through all our dos and don'ts, picked a date, and that was that. The day came and I went to their place. We had a few drinks, chatted, flirted a bit, and started kissing and getting handsy. He wasn't technically into guys, but we still smooched a little. Eventually, we made our way to the bedroom and things started happening, but I noticed she wasn't paying much attention to him, and he looked uncomfortable. We paused and asked if he was okay. He said, sure, so we went back at it. To make a long story short, he suddenly stood up and stormed out. She followed him, and there was yelling and crying from both of them. The guy was upset because she wasn't even looking at him and that she wasn't usually that vocal when it was just the two of them. He also mentioned he couldn't get a stiffy because he felt so self-conscious about the whole situation. She was upset too, saying she was only doing what he asked for and that it was supposed to be fun for her. She reminded us that we'd asked him if he was okay and that this had been his idea in the first place. After a while, the guy just got in his car and drove off. She came back to the room. I had already gotten dressed and was just waiting for a bit of quiet to make my escape. She tried to apologize and have a chat. I told her I understood and was sorry and that maybe it would have been better if I had left earlier. We were still kind of drunk, and she, I think, tried to make it up to me, but I just said something like, I'm sorry, I can't. I think you two have some things to work out. Then I left. Never really got back in touch with either of them. But I saw on Instagram that they broke up shortly after. No surprise there. Story 10. She brought me to her place from a bar. When we got there, her roommates were sitting in the common area with some of their friends. She asked me to just hang out there for a few minutes while she tidied up her room or something. It was pretty awkward for everyone, but I'm a sociable guy, so I tried to make polite small talk. They were all nice enough, introduced themselves, and so on. She came back and led me to her room, making it painfully obvious to the crowd of strangers what was happening. We started doing the thing, and then she asked, "Can I call you by my roommate's name?" I wasn't sure if she even realized I'd just learned her roommate's name in those few minutes she left me alone with him, or if she just didn't care. I told her I wasn't really comfortable with that, and she said it was okay and we could keep going. So, we did for about 30 more seconds. Then she started laughing, which quickly flipped to outright crying, then back to laughing, then crying again. It was too much for me. I started putting on my pants as fast as I could while she insisted everything was okay. Still laughed crying and told me she wanted to keep going. Hell no! I still have no idea what exactly was going on between her and her roommate, but I wasn't gonna be the one to find out. Story 11. She lived with her ex-boyfriend. They had very recently broken up. I'd met him a few times when they were together, and he was actually a nice guy. She was very vocal the entire time. Thankfully, she didn't use my name. Unfortunately, she kept calling me Papi. I absolutely hated that. She was Mexican, so it wasn't culturally insensitive or anything, but I am just not into being called that or any version of daddy. She reached her peak and tried to get me too as well, but the constant Papi was a major stiffy killer. I just couldn't get there. On top of that, I really didn't feel like running into her ex in the morning, so I got dressed and left. She kept asking me to stay, but it would have been way too awkward for me. About a month later, she messaged me to let me know she had chlamydia and that I should get tested because she was pretty sure we had done it without protection. I'm a huge stickler for safe bang, and I very vividly remember putting on a rubber. This was during college, and the last thing I needed was to ruin my life with an unexpected kid or an STI. A few months later, I was telling a friend about our hookup, and he said, "Oh yeah, that Mormon chick? That was an even bigger no." I haven't seen or talked to her since that night, which is fine, but she was really, really sexy, so I still think about her every now and then, especially when I hear the word poppy. Story 12. We didn't even get to the banging part, but some guy gave me his number while I was working, and after a few days, I decided to text him. I went over to his place and he got me food, but I wasn't hungry, so I politely declined, already feeling bad and making things awkward. He asked if I smoked weed and I said I didn't anymore, but it was cool if he did, so he did. After a little while, he was barely making conversation and suddenly asked, "You can tell me to F off if not, but do you think I can get some blowy?" I was like, no, we haven't even kissed." He said, "Oh well, we can kiss," and I just agreed. I forgot he'd been smoking weed, and the taste really threw me off. On top of that, he was the worst kisser I'd ever met. I pulled away, washed my mouth, came back out, said I had to get going, and promptly left. He still comes into the place I work sometimes, and I dread seeing him every single time, YOLO. I told my coworkers he gave me his number but didn't tell them I actually met up with him because, honestly, he's not exactly the prettiest peach in the bunch. Plus, I'm pretty embarrassed about the whole encounter, so yeah, kept that part to myself. Story 13. This was back in college. The young lady, let's call her the blonde, was part of a group of wild but good wild ladies who lived across the street. The ringleader of that group was dating my roommate, so our social circles were pretty intertwined. It's hard to believe I was even more dense with women back then, but that's just how it was. I needed a slap in the face to notice when a woman was interested, and sure enough, I got one. At the time, I was in the college version of a long-distance relationship, so technically free to do what I wanted, though my heart was elsewhere. During this time, the ringleader took the blonde and a friend of mine out for coffee. There was a lot of superficial chatter and some meaningful looks exchanged between the ringleader and the blonde. The next part still makes me shake my head. The blonde handed me a note. Yes, a note. Folded up like we were back in middle school. I kept that note for a while. I wish I still had it. It was amazing. The opening line read, "I don't want to give you mixed messages," and then went on to do exactly that. Every point she made, she somehow countered. To sum it up, she expressed her interest but wanted the reassurance that we would be a couple. I read it and had no idea what to make of it. Yep, I was that clueless. The four of us made our way back to her place. My friend, who was always more on the ball, started entertaining the ringleader while the blonde led me up to her room. She brought me into her room, then shut off the lights. She then kissed me where I start getting what's going on. She broke the kiss to ask me, "Are you scared?" This really threw me, good and proper. This 120-pound girl was asking me, a 230-pound guy, if I was scared. I wisely ignored the question and dove back into kissing. Soon, she was assertively banging me. As we were doing it, the doorbell rang. "Oh," she said, her voice tense. "That's probably my boyfriend," she added, eyes wide. That was the first time I ever heard about a boyfriend. Let me tell you, my friend, I've never gone from dong in someone to fully dressed that fast before or since. I hurried downstairs to find my friend. In his wingman role had ordered a pizza, figuring I'd be hungry and it might entertain the ringleader. The blonde was already tucking into some pizza, exchanging significant looks with the ringleader. I leaned into my friend and whispered, "Did she say anything about a boyfriend?" He cut me off with a grin. "Man, you reek like you've been banging." Still catching my breath and chewing on some pizza, the doorbell rang, and sure enough, it was the boyfriend standing there in his rugby jersey. He was a big guy. Catching my friend's eye, I put the onus of getting us out of there on him. He picked up the ball and ran with it, hustling us out of the apartment. So, she knew the guy was coming and was trying to force the issue. Story 14. He had just started college, so we went out drinking. When we got back, his family was out, so we started doing the deed in his bedroom. Somehow, we didn't hear his stepdad come home, even though he was drunk and stumbling around. I was on top, shirt half on, when his stepdad fell through the door, grinning and congratulating him on getting into college. He must not have noticed us at first. He stopped dead in his tracks at the side of the bed, almost eye level with me, did a double take, quietly apologized, and started to leave. But then he got to the door, said, "Oh, screw it," turned back around, and while I was still in shock, still on top of my boyfriend, he leaned down and gave him the most awkward side hug ever, muttering congratulations. We never spoke of it again. Story 15. I'd been talking to this woman for a few days. She seemed normal. Everything was fine. We ended up hooking up, and right after, while we were lying there talking, she asked if I could drive her to her drug dealer's house because he just got some crack in. "But don't worry," she said. She said share. Yeah, I noped out of there. Another time, I was with a single mom. We finished, and then she heard her kid calling for her. She snuck me out the back door so her kid wouldn't see me. On a different occasion, I was in the middle of doing it with a woman who started biting me. She scratched me so hard it drew blood. I told her I didn't like pain, but she bit me again. I said stop. But she kept going and bit me a second time, breaking the skin. I just got up and left, and never talked to her again. Story 16. It was a Tinder date. I met her at the restaurant, and honestly, she looked nothing like her pictures. She definitely knew the right angles for her face. I should have just gone home then. But nope, we had dinner, and then went back to her place to watch a movie. She told me to ride with her since I didn't have my car. When we got to her place, she threw on Netflix. Me, being the idiot I am, didn't catch on that she didn't really care what we watched. So I put on Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, because it's hilarious. We got about 10 minutes into the movie when she started trying to rip my pants off. I was pretty irritated that she didn't want to watch this cinematic masterpiece. She convinced me to go back to her room to bang. I wasn't really into her, but it had been years since I'd had some. I told her I didn't have a rubber. She said that was fine and opened a dresser drawer full of them. I paused, thought about it, then said, "Screw it," and put on the Jimmy. She turned off the lights and got ready. For 24, she had some seriously saggy flapjacks. Anyways, we banged for like 10 minutes, and she finished. But I didn't. There's no faking it when you're a guy. I told her I needed to use the restroom. She had 3 chihuahuas but left them out of the room while we were banging. When I opened the door to head to the hall bathroom, I stepped right into a warm, squishy, and smelly pile of dog poop. One of her chihuahuas crapped in the hall while we were doing it. I was done. Then I remembered I didn't drive there. So, after dealing with the steamy, newly squished mess and cleaning my foot off in her sink, thank God it was on tile, I got back to her room. We sort of cuddled, and I managed to snag my phone from my pants. I texted a homie who I knew would be up at that hour, explained my situation, and asked for a ride. He showed up in no time. I got out of bed, got dressed, told her I wasn't feeling well and needed to leave, and then ghosted her. I felt terrible, but I knew it wasn't going anywhere. Story 17. Out of the blue, I got a text from a former friend with benefits I hadn't seen in a couple of years. I was single at the time, and she asked if I wanted to come over, so I went. What I didn't realize was that since we last saw each other, she'd had a child, which was fine, but she had also gained quite a bit of weight. Not to sound shallow, but the honest truth is that if I'd known what she looked like when she invited me over, I probably wouldn't have gone, but I was already there, and I didn't have it in me to tell her I wasn't attracted to her anymore. So, when she made a move, I went along with it. She was way more into it than I was, which honestly is probably the only reason I was able to finish. The whole experience felt completely different from how things used to be between us, back when I was still physically attracted to her. I felt gross afterward and got dressed almost as soon as we were done. Back when we were friends with benefits, it was about a 50-50 split between staying the night and going home. So I told her I was heading out and she didn't question it. Over the next few months, she texted me a few times, but I kept making excuses about why we couldn't meet up until she eventually stopped trying. Story 18. It was only the second time I'd ever had intimate relations. I was at a party, and the host invited me up to her bedroom. The lights were off, we were fooling around, and she asked me to bang her. But every time I tried to do it, I'd pop right out. After what felt like forever trying to get my rhythm right, she suddenly told me to stop because I couldn't perform. I turned on the light, and there it was. She was on her period. Blood was everywhere. I was confused, frustrated, and honestly angry. I cleaned the blood off my hands and asked my friend for a ride home. He told me later that she'd been telling all the girls I couldn't perform. Meanwhile, her so-called lube had me completely thrown off. I'm not small either. It was a messed up situation. I told my friend what happened on the ride home, only to find out he had a crush on her the whole time. My naive self never saw it coming. Easily the most regrettable 10% of LA. Story 19. I had a friend with benefits situation with an older woman. I was at her place and she was on top of me. After she was done, she stayed on top and said we needed to have a talk about being in a relationship. I politely told her it wasn't the right time for that, but if she wanted to have the conversation, we could definitely do it later, after she got off me. She refused. So, I used a breathing technique I'd learned to keep my body relaxed and avoid reacting emotionally. I repeated myself in a firmer, more stern voice and told her to get off me, and she still refused. By then, I was terrified of how this was going to escalate. The third time, I was simple, clear, and firm. Get off me now. Luckily for me, she finally removed herself. As I tried to grab my clothes and leave, she kept trying to stop me. Every time she grabbed me, I froze and didn't react. Once I got my clothes, I immediately headed for the door. Outside, I saw I had a flat tire. I rode the rim all the way to a gas station 2 miles down the road. Needless to say, I stopped having those kinds of relationships after that. That moment was a serious reality check for me. Story 20. Meanwhile, her massive dog kept trying to jump on the bed while we were in the middle of things. She kept shoving him off and yelling at him to stop. Apparently, he'd had enough, because out of nowhere he bit the hell out of her leg. She gets up, kicks the dog out of the room, and slams the door shut. Her leg is bleeding, but she just climbs right back on top of me like nothing happened. Meanwhile, the dog is howling outside the door and her neighbor starts banging on the wall, yelling for her to shut the dog up. All of this is happening, chaos, blood, noise, and she's looking me dead in the eye, telling me to keep going. I got up, got dressed, and left. Story 21. She looked at me, confused. Why did you stop? I raised an eyebrow, because you literally yelled stop, sep so loudly the neighbors could probably hear. She scoffed and rolled her eyes. Okay, but stop doesn't always actually mean stop. Lady, unless I sign a waiver with a lawyer present before we get started. I'm not playing consent mind games to make you happy, especially when you didn't discuss it with me and didn't give me a safe word. That moment genuinely messed up my entire sense of sexuality for a while because there was a half a second that it felt like I was doing something to a woman that she didn't want done, despite prior consent. And even that half second was enough to scar my soul. Story 22. I met this girl at a music festival. Her group happened to camp right next to mine and my best friends. We all hit it off, and after getting absolutely hammered, she ended up crashing in my tent that night. No banging happened the first night. I woke up in the morning to find her gone. She was cooking breakfast with her group, who were kind enough to make us some food too. She told me she wasn't sleeping on the ground again, so I went and grabbed my queen-size air mattress, didn't set it up the day before, got too drunk too fast, and shoved it into a full-size tent. Problem was, I couldn't fully inflate it, so it ended up only partially filled. Still, I guess that really impressed her and her friends, that I went through the trouble just so she'd sleep in my tent with me. I don't know, lo. Fast forward to that second night, we start doing it, but it was awkward as hell because the half-inflated mattress kept folding us up like a taco. We ended up laughing so hard we couldn't keep going, decided to just call it, have a few more drinks, and fall asleep together. Fast forward, 8 years, we're happily engaged, own a house together, and have 4 cats and 5 chickens. Story 23. I was hooking up with an ex, who told me she recently broken up with her boyfriend. Mid-act, her phone rang. She answered but told me to keep going, so I obliged. They talked for about 30 seconds and then he said, "I love you." She looked me dead in the eyes, smirked and said, "I love you too." I just stood up, threw her clothes at her, and said, "Never again." He actually ended up proposing to her eventually, but obviously it didn't work out. Lucky for him, he got out before it was too late. Story 24. I was SA'd. I basically hooked up with a girl I'd been talking to for a bit. I made sure she understood it was purely for fun and that I was practicing safe banging, don't want no kids or anything. Halfway through, she got in charge, and in the heat of the moment, quickly pulled the rubber off without telling me. She rushed me back in and started going at it like she was trying to get me to put my baby gravy in her. I told her to get off me, but she pinned me down as hard as she could. I finally threw her off, and she ended up bashing her head on my desk. She flipped out at me like I was the bad guy. The police were called, but luckily they took my side. Story 25. My ex walked in. I'd broken up with my ex a few months earlier. She was honestly psychotic. In the meantime, I'd started seeing someone new. My roommates never locked the front door, and my bedroom door didn't have a lock. So, of course, my psycho ex just barged into my room while I was going to town on my new girl. Could have been a fairy tale story if things had gone differently. Instead, she started screaming and threatening to off us. Definitely not very fun. Story 26. A random Tinder chick I'd only talked to for 2 days came over for a drunken hookup. Mid-bang, she suddenly and forcefully put her middle finger up my back door with no warning or lube. She had long nails, and I'd never experienced anything like that before. The pain and disgust hit me instantly. It was the most humiliating and degrading feeling I've ever had. I literally jumped off her, screamed, "Get the hell out, bish," at the top of my lungs, and later sobbed bare in the shower. I felt so defiled, like I'd been hardcore violated. Felt like Ace Ventura when he burns all his clothes and cries in the shower. Story 27. I had a casual hookup with a married woman. Her husband was in the other room, probably silently cheering her on. At the moment I finished, she looks me dead in the eye and says, "Promise me you'll never leave me." Like if this was our first date, and B, her husband was right there enjoying the show. She already had stable companionship. So yeah, I got dressed, broke that promise almost instantly, and ghosted the husband too. Bonus weird context, before we met, she'd been rude about my dong, insisting she'd never be with a turtleneck dong guy, and that uncut dongs were gross. Honestly, I was mostly sleeping with her just to prove her wrong. It's a shame that she was so weird. I was actually looking forward to hanging out with the husband afterward. He seemed pretty cool. Story 28. Not me, but a girl I was regularly hooking up with left halfway through once because she noticed my tongue was blue. I'd taken a blue chew. She was really bothered by it. I'd usually take one discreetly in her bathroom when we got back to her place. I don't have ED, but she was a bartender and I think an alcoholic. When we hung out, I'd get plastered trying to keep up with her, and sometimes my member wouldn't cooperate. That blue tongue ended things, but honestly, I'm glad. I was heading down a dark path with her. Story 29. She was hammered. I was drunk too, but she'd been slamming the bottle we were sharing way more than me, which was all chill. Then she gave me that gawk look and puked all over me. Also chill. So, we just hopped in the shower? I got out of the shower first and went downstairs. When she got out and didn't see me, she ran outside wrapped in just a towel, screaming my name at the top of her lungs because she thought I'd left the house. I came back upstairs and tried to calm her down for a bit, but then realized I wasn't ready for that level of bat crap. So, I proceeded to get the F out. Story 30. There was this really nice girl in my first year of university. She was part of my group of friends, and we got along well, working on projects together. Still, I had another partner for the next 3 years and went on an exchange program for a year in a different country with my then-girlfriend. When I came back, we broke up, no hard feelings, and I stayed close friends with my ex. We're still close today with zero banging involved after the breakup. A few months after the breakup, I met with that first girl again to catch up. We spent the afternoon together. Chill, wholesome, and fun. Just a good time overall. We went out for dinner, started flirting pretty hard, and eventually ended up at her place. We got all kissy and bare and gave each other blowy. Then she suddenly said, "Stop, no." I stopped, and she tried to explain that she wasn't feeling it, seeming embarrassed. I said, "All right," got dressed, gave her a kiss on the cheek, and left. Just went home. No hard feelings, though I was a bit grumpy at the moment. We didn't meet again after that. In hindsight, I probably wasn't feeling it either, so it was good she stopped us. But after the breakup, I guess I was just horny. Story 31. I had a crush on this guy named Adam for like a year, and he finally started being into me. One night, we went out and ended up back at my apartment. The first red flag was how he tried to kiss me. He was literally trying to eat my mouth. Then he started going to my downtown area, and honestly, it was the worst I've ever had. It was so bad, I remember lying there, staring up at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to end it. So I faked it, and he did his thing and was done in literally 5 seconds. Then he got up, took the rubber off, and just laid back down and fell asleep. I got out of bed and slept on the couch. The next morning he was trying to take his time leaving, so I left my own damn apartment and asked my neighbor to let me know when he finally left. He stayed for like an hour before he finally left. I never answered his calls or texts again. Fast forward a year later, my best friend at the time tells me she's talking to a guy and it's him. She said they had great banging, and I was like, "Ain't no way, girl. I know you're lying," but I didn't say anything. We became friends shortly after, but I didn't want to call her out. Story 32. I've got a couple. So, this girl and I were fooling around. She teased me a lot. We'd get close to doing the deed, but never quite got there. Eventually, she took me shopping for some new clothes for her. I stuck around because I really wanted this to work. The problem was, I had a serious case of blue balls. It hurt a lot, like a Charlie horse times 10. We got back to her place. She slipped into her new outfit and took off her inners. We got in position, but after just one touch, I exploded. She laughed so hard, and I felt so embarrassed I had to leave. The second time, I hooked up with a girl I met at a rock show. We spent hours walking around town, getting to know each other. We stopped at a gas station for some water and then headed back to my place. Things got steamy and she got on top. As we were going at it, I noticed some white stuff in her downtown area. I freaked out, thinking, "Oh crap, she's got an STD and it's all over me." Don't worry, I was wearing a rubber. I ran to the bathroom and started cleaning up. Then it hit me, it was just toilet paper. The gas station bathroom had that terrible paper-thin kind. I went back, told her what happened, and we both cleaned up and laughed so hard about it. We talked for a while afterward, and when the mood came back, we picked up where we left off. Story 33. During my senior year in college, I was just starting a one-night stand with a girl whose last name I didn't even know. She was an RA in one of the dorms, and I'd already slept with a few women on her floor. I think she knew I was a sure thing because she invited me up to her room. We messed around for a while, then she asked if I had a rubber. I said yes and handed it to her. We actually ended up having a really great time. Physically, we fit well together. We found a nice rhythm, and I felt like we were in for a fun night. I was even planning to run up to my room and grab a couple more rubbers so we could keep going. Then, suddenly, she started to cry and said we needed to stop. She had an unfaithful boyfriend back home. She wanted to get back at him but still hoped to work on their relationship, so she couldn't continue. I immediately pulled my guy out, told her I understood, gave her a hug, put myself back together, and left. I saw them together at graduation. Not sure if they stayed a couple, but I hope she's happy. She was a good person. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.